Hello, my name is Mark and I'm going to show you how to get a SharePoint Mac application into the Apple Store. And it's not as straightforward as you might think. The first part of this video, I'm just going to show you how to make a SharePoint application work on the Mac, and then the second part will be dealing with getting it ready for the Apple Store. And there's more to do than what I'm showing here, but specifically to SharePoint and specifically to CSOM, this is what this video is going to be for. I'm going to demonstrate the errors you're going to have along the way. So unfortunately, I'm going to watch this whole thing. I'll leave some notes below to summarize what I did and links summarizing what I did, but this is a whole demonstration of all the errors that you're going to receive along the way to get to the final result. So let's start with this, and I'll get my reading glasses on. And first here we have Visual Studio for the Mac, otherwise known as Xamarin. Microsoft bought Xamarin and of course renamed it to Visual Studio for the Mac. If you're going to look anything up about Visual Studio for the Mac, just use the term Xamarin. You will be much happier. You'll be able to find things. If you use Visual Studio for the Mac, you're going to find a bunch of stuff for the PC, and it's a big pain in the butt. So this is my application that I've written called SP Navigator, and I'd appreciate it if you use SharePoint, that you and you use a Mac, that you purchase it. It's $30. It's just a simple little file utility. You can drag and drop files from your PC to SharePoint or between different versions of SharePoint. As we go on, I'll add new features to this application, but right now it's pretty simple. But $30 will help me out, and we'll continue the development on it. I'll also show how I'm going about adding these new features when I think they're interesting to show. I'm going to try to keep these videos short. I know that this video is going to be long because there's a bunch that's involved. There's a bunch of hoops you have to go through. So let's just get to it. The first thing is let's create a new solution. And just to be consistent, we'll go down to App and say Cocoa App. We can do it in F# as well if we really wanted to, but we're going to use C#. You could do a game, but a game and SharePoint, probably not likely. Probably be an app. In fact, you're probably going from PowerShell to the Mac because you want to use your Mac and you want to use PowerShell for SharePoint. Let's call this Demo 1. We don't really need to change anything else. Target, I like to keep it as low as possible because I want to have it available to as many people as possible, but this is all fine. I'll leave it alone. We don't have anything we want to add or change here. Normally I would use Git for version control, but this is just a demo. I'm going to delete as soon as we're done here. And here we have our application. For laughs and giggles, let's run it. And I always start with debugging. Doesn't really matter. So it's building right now, and as soon as it's finished building, it will debug it and pop up a little window. So this is the default window. We haven't done anything with SharePoint yet. And if you close it, notice that the application is still running. This is actually a violation of Apple's rules. If you close all the windows to your application, the application is supposed to close as well. And I don't believe there's any real exceptions to that. So something to keep in mind. You'll have to change that at some point. Most of what we're going to try to do has to do with the general properties. So right now we're using the .NET framework for Xamarin Mac.Modern. That's actually .NET 4.5, but a minimized version, and Xamarin has the ability of stripping when you do linking with Xamarin of stripping out unused methods, unused references to other DLLs. So this is the one we'd prefer to use. We could use full, and if we were going to use it, CSOM, when we're going to connect to CSOM, is .NET 4.5, so we'd use that. But for now, let's start with the modern. That's what we prefer to use, which is also the default, and we've already done that. Let's go to View Controller. View Controller is linked with the window, and where it says add additional steps here, we are going to add in calling this query, or this method that I have not written yet. We will paste it in from another window. And I'll just drop it right here. And client context doesn't exist. Let's just talk about this really quickly as to what it's going to do. It's going to, when the window loads, the view loads, it's going to call this method. It's going to call the base method of it. And then it'll call this function, which is an async function. It's a task, so it's going to call this, and it will then execute, and then it'll exit this method as soon as it calls it, because this is going to be on another thread. And it'll set up the client context for SharePoint to this site. It's going to create the credentials, SharePoint Online credentials with this account, and just some password I made up. Don't try to hack it. I'm going to delete that account as soon as I'm done with this video. And going to load the web so that it'll have all the web objects and be able to see that. And then query async. We have to use the execute query async because of what we are going to try first. So let's first, we don't have the references, which is why these are all underlined. So let's manage .NET, go to packages and manage that. And we're going to look for CSOM. In this list, you'll have a bunch of different versions. This one here is Microsoft. So that one's by Microsoft. That's good. And this is for SharePoint Online, and it's fairly recent, very recent. There's 2013, 2016. Here's another one that's SharePoint Online. So what is this about? It has fewer downloads. It's 2018. Author is a person, so this is not what we want. We want it by Microsoft. And we can go down the list, and there's more things that say CSOM. There's also PNP. You can use PNP if you wish, except I advise against it just because of the methodology I'm going to use here. PNP is going to cause more work for you. So let's stick to CSOM and not deal with PNP. Plus also, you're writing a C# application. You can do everything you need in C#. CSOM will get what you want. There's some cool features to PNP, but it's not necessary for the basic stuff. So we're just doing some basic stuff. So let's just stick with that. We're going to add this package. We're not going to read anything. We'll just accept it. It's added the package. There it is there. And if we look in references, those are the references, which is great. And these are still in red because we need to add, Microsoft SharePoint client. And they all went away. All right, so let's add some breakpoints. I put this try catch here because I know from previous attempts I've known that this will cause an exception, and but let's pretend we don't know that, and let's go ahead and run this. Start debugging it, and the window should pop up and run away, and it did. And here we have an exception. So I have the exception down here for easy access. Let's change it to message. We'll see what it says. Cannot find platform service library for Windows Store application. Please include Microsoft SharePoint client runtime Windows Store DLL. Now I know what this is about. But all right, so let's go look at our references, and we'll see from package. And if we look here, client runtime. That's the only client runtime is this one. And there's no Windows Store DLL. If you go to the project folder, I have it here. Okay, so if I go to the project folder, here's demo 1. Here's the packages. You can see here's the package we just installed. And here are the libraries. Let's talk about these for a second. WPA is for Windows Phone. If you were making a Windows Phone application, that's the library you would link to. But we're not. So that is not going to go. Here's another Windows Phone version. This is 4.5 NET Core, so it's a combination of a few things. Here's NET Core 4.5, .NET, here's .NET 4.0 full, and then here's JavaScript. So if you don't even want to use the C libraries or C# libraries, you can call JavaScript, and the full JavaScript is here. So we're not going to do that, but which one did it apply? Now I happen to know it applied this one. And the reason I know is if you look at these libraries, they all say .portable at the end. And there's also this one that says .portable, but this isn't Windows Phone, so it's definitely not that one. This WPA one also says portable, but that's Windows Phone. The .NET 4.5, they do not say portable. And the .NET 4.0 does not say portable. And nor does the JavaScript even have any relevance at all. So it's this one. This is the one that we're calling. And if we look, we can see SharePoint Client Runtime Windows Store DLL. That's the DLL it was looking for, but it didn't find it. And I wonder why. Now, I know I probably should stop with the drama. All right, so let's go to demo 1. I made a copy of it, and I'm just going to put it in the bin folder. And the reason I'm doing this is so that when I add this reference, I'm going to add the reference to that DLL. And .NET Assembly, I'm going to browse for it. And I put it in the bin folder. And there it showed up there, right? So now we're still running, so let's go ahead and stop. And let's start debugging again and see what this says this time. And I suspect we get another exception, which we do. And the exception is could not resolve token. And the issue is could not load file or assembly windows. Well, we're never going to be able to load the windows.dll. We're not running on Windows. We're running on a Mac. How is this ever going to work? And the answer is it's never going to work. You're never going to be able to get this DLL to load as is. It's just never going to happen. So what can we do differently? Here's what we do. Let's go back to the packages. Here's .NET Core. Here's .NET 4.5. But this doesn't have Windows Store in it at all. So different versions are going to have different DLLs, right? These DLLs have to be different. They're not the same as the .NET Core 4.5. So how do we get to use it? Well, here's how. First, let's get rid of this reference that we added. Let's stop the application from running. Let's remove the package and go back to the options of this application. In general, remember we started off with Xamarin Mac.Modern. Well, let's change it to the full .NET Framework 4.5. And now there's other ways of doing this, but this is simpler and cleaner, so let's just do it this way. So now let's re-add this now that we've changed the target a bit. All right, so now it's added, and we have these DLLs, even that runtime windows. I don't know if that has anything to do with anything. It's not the point. We're using a new target. But we have an error with that says that some password is the wrong. In fact, we have the errors here. Now we're going to have to build it. So let's just build it so we can see the error nicely here. So this says argument 2 cannot convert from string to system security secure string. All right, that's easy enough to solve, which is the reason why I have this second line here. Except that make password doesn't exist, so let me grab a method I use all the time. Feel free to copy this. I think there's versions of this method on the internet everywhere. And it uses secure string, so let's go ahead and add using system security. So now this looks good, and we still have our breakpoints. Let's go ahead and try to debug this again and see what happens now. And here we have another exception, which says no access to given key. Well, that's a horrible message. So if we look at the inner exception message, let's see what that says. Access to path, library, application support. This is a local path. Well, I've already debugged into this, and so I'll skip all of my debugging of what's going on in here. CSOM is trying to create a debug file for debugging into SQL, or debugging into the SQL code of CSOM. And I believe it's used for test purposes only, but in CSOM, if you use Reflector, which we will do later, but if you use Reflector, you will see that it's actually never used. This file that they create is never used. And so you don't really need this file, but it's giving you an error. Another workaround is to simply create this folder. And we will do it manually, but if you were going to do something that you would distribute to other people, I would do this automatedly. So first, let's create this COM. This is the name of the application, right? And this is in library application support. So that is right here. This is library application support. And I'm going to create a new folder. There it is. Copy in the name. And then I need to make a subfolder. And the subfolder is local machine. Go here, new folder, paste in the name. All right, let's close this. Run, stop, run, start debugging. There's our window popped up, and it passed through. It passed through, and we have context. Here I already had a reference, just for ease, to show that the title exists. If we wanted to look at the rest of the objects of the web object, we can do that. Expand this out. It's loading. We can see some GUIDs. We can see the date time it was created. We can see what master page it has. So we have the object. We got all the data. We're great. We're finished. Done. No, we're not done. If you were going to simply use this for your own internal use and you didn't want to go to the App Store, you could be done right now. You could say, okay, great. That's all I needed to know. I just have to use this version of CSOM and create that folder. No big deal. Okay. But if you want to deploy this to the App Store, which is really the challenge, we're not done. There's quite a bit more work we have to do, because if we try to make a package out of this, let's stop the application. If we try to make a package out of this, create an installer package, right, it will have references to Windows, the Windows OS, that don't exist on the Mac. And for the just-in-time compiler, it's not a problem because it doesn't try to load them until it needs them. And as long as you don't call code, as for example, if you were going to open up a Internet Explorer window, as long as you don't call that, it's not going to have a problem. But if you were to call it, then it would crash because it would say it wouldn't be able to load X or Y DLL. But Apple is going to look at those references and say this DLL does not exist on the Mac, which it doesn't. It doesn't have anything for Internet Explorer. And we know that CSOM, especially PNP, has references to like Internet Explorer, especially when you're using it to open up a website that's got two-stage authentication. You kind of have to use an Internet Explorer or some kind of web browser. We have Safari, and we can use Safari, but CSOM doesn't know anything about Safari. So we're kind of in a quandary. We don't want to have those references if we're deploying to the App Store. Xamarin gets rid of them with link and compile behavior. It gets rid of these external references, but it won't get rid of them, not very well, if you're using the full .NET Framework 4.5. We want this to be modern so that we can use the linker, the compiler and linker behaviors to reduce the methods and make a small, the purpose is to make a smaller executable, make a smaller package, but we want to get rid of all of those Windows references from our code. And we're kind of in a quandary. What do we do? Well, there's two answers. One answer I hate this answer. So the first thing you do is when you create this installer package, you can edit the package with a binary editor and manually zero out the references to those DLLs. The problem that I have with this is twofold. One, you are editing the binary or the package, but you're editing it after you finish testing it. Now you're going to hand it to Apple. If anything goes wrong, you don't know if those changes you made are the things that caused it to go wrong. You don't even know if that binary works at all. You may have just completely broken it by doing that. But even if you didn't completely broke it, even if that works, now every time you make a build, you have to use this binary editor to do this manual manipulation. And if you want to test it, you have to make a different build with this package and install, which isn't a problem, by manually editing it and then test it. And this manual editing, or even if, like I said, even if you use a tool, you create a tool for this, which wouldn't be hard to do, to look for these references and to zero them out. Even if you created a tool, it's this extra step that may or may not be necessary in the future. And not only that, it's after you finish testing it. So those are my issues with it. I'd much rather test what it is I'm going to deploy. Well, this is also very hacky, but I like this a whole lot better because it puts me into control. And it makes it so that I can decide what is going to be in my final product rather than the compiler and whether or not linking works or not. And what we should do is use Reflector to reflect the .NET code. So Reflector is my favorite tool. If you're not using Reflector, if you're on Windows, oh my gosh, you should use Reflector. Reflector will help you develop so much. That's my advertisement for Reflector. So here is Reflector 8.5. It's an old version, but it works fine. So I've already loaded up these two CSOM DLLs. And if we look at it, here's the client DLL. We expand these out. We can look at all the methods, all the classes, and everything. And all you do is you right-click on this, There's export source code. So let's go ahead and reflect on this assembly. What we're going to do with this is we're going to create a DLL. We're not going to import this into our executable, but instead we're going to create a DLL, just like the DLL that exists, except we can have a completely different name. We can have a unique name. And there's a benefit to this. And this is also a reason why I'm doing it this way, because it solves a second problem, which we'll see in a second. And it is still going. We're done with Reflector for now. So let's get rid of this package. I'm going to remove the package. That will cause the references to become invalid again, right? And let's add new project, a class library. And we're going to call this CSOM SPO. So now we have this thing called CSOM SPO. And look at the options. General. We want to have it in Mac.Modern. This time we can choose anything we want because we're going to compile it. So it could be Mac.Modern. That would be fine. We're not importing any references. Other than, well, we will import references, but only the ones that are needed by the code. But we're not. But those will be normal .NET references. And the ones that we can't find, we're simply going to comment out. Go to Documents, Reflector, Disassembler, Microsoft SharePoint Client. We don't need that open. We don't need that open. So let's do this an easy way. Here's our exported Reflector code. Let's go to our project. Here's our CSOM code. So we want the assembly CS to be in there. You know, let's get global CS anyway as well. I'm not going to bother with Microsoft folder. Let's just grab these two, put them in here, make it simpler. So let's add existing files, and we are going to add global and assembly. Those are two that we just added, right? And if we look at the assembly, we'll see that the assembly has names and all that kind of stuff. And it says this one's got a duplicate name, and it probably does because it has assembly CS already existing, right? So let's just go here. Let's just grab the contents of this. Go here and just add it to the very end. And let's delete this one. And we'll just delete it as well. If you want to, back it up so that you can start again. But trademark, not going to care about. Copyright, care about. All right, so this we're going to definitely want, but this namespace doesn't exist yet. And these are all duplicates. All right. So these are the ones that we need, and these grayed out are just telling me that it doesn't need all of that. And notice the reference, Microsoft SharePoint. It's no longer an error. And just simplify name. Simplify name. All right, so client type assembly we don't have. Script, and this script factory is important. So that's in a different DLL, different CSOM DLL. So let's go ahead and do the same with that DLL. And so let's go back to Reflector. Go to the Windows here. Right, here's client runtime. Export source code. We're going to do it to the same, well, not the same folder, but the same disassembler folder. Start that. This is why I created both of those. Reflector saw the dependency and imported the dependency. So Reflector was being smart and I was being stupid. All right, so let's get rid of that. So now we have this folder. It's got assembly information again. We shouldn't need it. Global, we shouldn't need. All of the CSOM files, all of them are set up the same way, so that's not necessary. Here's the SharePoint. Here's client. All right, so we have this, and we do have client. So we do have a client folder. We have a client folder there. So let's do something a little different. Because this is client.runtime, I'm going to create another folder called client.runtime. So I'm going to put this in the SharePoint application, but I'm going to change some things. I'm going to change this to client runtime. And that's the only folder that exists. And if we go here, go to SharePoint, here's the client folder. We're going to put it the same level as that. Now, I'm doing this purely for organizational reasons. Where you put them exactly is not terribly important. And so here, I can then say add existing folder. And here's client runtime that I just added there. And I'm going to include all and say OK. And there you go. Client type assembly is now there. We're going to get a bunch of errors when we do this. For this one, let's just comment out all our code. Just comment it all out just so that we can build. We'll put it back in later. So at least we'll build the executable, and it'll try to build the DLL. And we're not going to go through and try to fix all the errors with the DLL. All right, I'm just going to go through a few of them. And here we have 242 errors. There's actually more than that, but this is fine. All right, here's basically what you can do. These methods are not necessary. We don't have to have them. We can comment them out. And I normally put my name and just there and just comment it out. You might say, but, if we really need it, we can add it back in. I put this little man, it's my initials, by anything I comment out, and I can add it in later. So now we have 242, build all. We're at 146, right? So identifier expected. Same kind of thing here. Ensure form digest async. This is task. Let's just comment it out. Not a big deal. And we may end up causing, and let's just close all of these as we go. Just build again. Now that was 146, now we're at 142. Again, not a huge deal. In fact, let's just get rid of that. So those are all commented out. Oops, the next one. All right. This is client object collection, and we can put these back again if we need them, but we won't. We won't. So we were at 142, I believe, in terms of errors. As I said, this will take about an hour, 2 hours to go through this whole process. So I don't really want to go through all of them. Again, if you notice, it's all of these compiler generated type stuff. And this is a sealed class within which method. This is in client value object collection. So here, like, we just don't even have this system XML. I believe if we try to add the reference, here's system XML. Okay, system XML. All right, great. So let's put that back in. So let's go and rebuild this all. We're at 133 errors. Building demo 1. And we may go up in errors at some point. Yeah, 254. System data SQL client. Now we're into that part where we had those folders. We are not going to be a SQL client. We are not going to call SQL ever. We're just not going to do it. Here's system web.configuration. But let's go to references and see if we can add these references anyway. So there's not going to be anything for SQL. There's SQLite, but that's not the same thing. And the other one was web. System web services, system web model. So I think these two references are just bad. So what we could do if we wanted, we could do a search and solution for all the system web configuration and just comment them out everywhere. Some of these things, even though we know this doesn't exist, this configuration section is certainly there. What we can probably do is just comment out the whole method, whole class I should say, and do that for all the places that reference the system web configuration. Anyway, this is going to take about 2 hours. All right, so let's open up my other project, SP Navigator. Let's do this. All right. All right, here is app instance in SPO, and I put man not needed, and I removed this. And if we look at the top, I commented out the SQL client, and I commented out the web configuration, just like we did before. I commented out some static variables that were not used. And here I commented out refresh connection string. Same thing with this. I went through and I commented out. All right, so you get the idea. You're going to have to do research on this. I would love to be able to distribute this code to you, but legally I can't. It's Microsoft's code. But you can use Reflector, and as long as you are using it to support your application, it's legal. Soon, if you deployed it and said this is my new CSOM code, I think you're getting into more of a whether or not it's legal. In fact, we saw originally that somebody else, some individual, had their own version of CSOM, and I believe that's true. That I believe that there's a bunch of different versions, and all they do is use Reflector to get their version of CSOM. So here is my application, SP Navigator, and I have different versions of CSOM. Here's CSOM for 2013, 2016, 2019, and SharePoint Online. And here's the base. So at runtime, I can determine which version of CSOM I'm going to use. This is much harder to do. It's possible to do, but it's much harder to do when you're using the libraries directly. But now that I have my own libraries, each one could be named their own unique name. And if I look at my code, and I go to app delegate, I know I have some references there. And where do I have it? So here I determine which version of SharePoint I'm using, and then I create the site based off of the version of SharePoint, and I put it to the base class, and I have overloads. Here's the base class, site base. So all of these classes inherit from site base, and they have, if we go down a bit, these virtual functions that I've created in the base class, and in these classes I have overrides. Where did I get down to the overrides? It's a lot of code, by the way. Here's override. Here's an override for test logon. And when my application calls these codes, it doesn't care If it's SharePoint 2019, SharePoint Online, SharePoint 2016, it calls the same methods or the relevant methods in the classes. And I could explain this in more detail. But this is another reason why you want to include the code using Reflector into your own code. It makes it so that if you have some PowerShell scripts and you're constantly writing them for 2013 and SharePoint Online and this other version, you can create DLLs that you refer to at the very beginning. SharePoint Online, just here's the DLL you use, and then you can have a base class, and you're always calling the base class. And so all of these classes that I'm using in this case are wrappers for the CSOM code. So I'm not calling CSOM directly. I'm wrapping the CSOM code. I did change the version number here. Instead of just saying SharePoint, normally it's Microsoft SharePoint client, but I changed it to SP 2019 to keep it very clean. But it doesn't even matter if this was Microsoft.SharePoint.client, because this SP19 DLL does not even know the SP16 DLL exists or the 13 DLL exists. It doesn't know anything about that. So these could all be SharePoint. These could all be Microsoft SharePoint client namespace. If I were to build this application, which is I'm just closing these windows. If I were to run this application, run without debugging, it's building and it's going to connect to SharePoint, just as an example here. This is a big application. There's a lot of stuff to it. Even though it does something very simple, it's a big application, especially since I'm connecting to different versions of CSOM. Like just simply logging in is a little different for each one. And there's lots of little nuances that we can get into over time. So where did my application go? There's my application. All right, so it's asking me to log in to the site. Gave me an invalid error. That shouldn't have been the right error. But anyway, so here I am logged into this site, and I expand things. And so it's calling CSOM, and this is a SharePoint Online site, the same actually site that we use for the demo app. And I've got document lists. I can move things around. If I want to move this document to the root, bam, it did it. Yeah, okay. So there, it did it, and it put it at the end. And I can move it back if I want to move it back. There we go. So it's using CSOM. Everything is cool. Everything is great. And all right, here's the reason why I changed the namespace for each one of these DLLs, because I created tests. And each one of these tests, the tests themselves, the references, refer to these DLLs. And if I had all the same namespaces, I couldn't refer to the SharePoint objects in those namespaces. So if I have a test for 2013, if I want to validate 2013 against CSOM, it would be harder. I'd have to have a wrapper for everything. But I wanted to have a specific 2013 test or a specific 2016 test. So that's what I had to do. That's the reason why the namespaces are different names. All right, well, I hope this was helpful. Again, this will take a while to get everything together. If you have questions, please ask questions below. I'll try to get to all the questions. Yeah, I know this video was long, but it's not really a simple thing. You kind of have to start from the ground up. And that's application development. The next video, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. We'll see. See you guys.